Ethan Carter slammed his resignation letter on the desk at 11:47 p.m., then stopped. His hand was shaking. His daughter's drawing was taped to the corner of his monitor, a crayon son, a stick figure dad, and the words, "My hero." He picked up the letter, stared at it, then slowly folded it in half and pushed it into his pocket. Not yet. But what happened 3 days later in that countryside estate? In one room, one bed, one night of silence that became confession, would change everything. He thought he knew about survival, about pride, and about the woman who traced her fingers down his spine in the dark and whispered, "You don't have to be okay." If you're watching from New York, Dallas, Chicago, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels, and if this is your first time here, subscribe. You don't want to miss where this goes. The alarm went off at 5:14 a.m. Ethan didn't need it. He'd been awake since 4. He lay still for exactly 30 seconds. The only 30 seconds of the day that belonged to him, staring at the ceiling of his apartment on the north side of Chicago, listening to the city hum outside the window. Then he heard it, the small sound that ended those 30 seconds every single morning. "Daddy!" Soft footsteps, a door creaking. And then 6-year-old Lily appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, her dark hair tangled from sleep, her stuffed rabbit, the one she'd named Mr. Biscuit, and refused to sleep without dangling from her left hand. "I had the dream again," she said. He was already sitting up. "Come here." She climbed onto the bed and pressed her face against his chest without another word. He wrapped one arm around her and held her until he felt her breathing slow back down. He didn't ask what the dream was about. He already knew. She never said the word mom, but he always knew. He sat there holding his daughter in the gray pre-dawn of a Tuesday morning and thought about the folded letter in his jacket pocket. The one he hadn't been able to hand over. The one he kept rewriting in his head every night before he fell asleep. Resignation. Effective immediately. Except it was never effective. Because every morning, Lily climbed into his arms, and he remembered why he hadn't quit yet. By 6:45, Lily was dressed, fed, and deposited at her school 3 blocks away. Ethan kissed the top of her head at the gate, watched her run toward her classroom with Mr. Biscuit tucked under her arm. She was allowed to bring him on Tuesdays. Her teacher made an exception, and then he turned and walked back toward the L station with his collar up against the November wind. He rode the train in silence, standing in the aisle, one hand on the overhead rail, the other scrolling through 47 unread emails on his phone. Most of them were from her. Claire Hamilton, Director of Operations, Meridian Logistics Group, his boss. He'd worked at Meridian for 4 years. Started in the shipping department, moved up to regional coordinator, and now managed a logistics team of 11 people across the Midwest region. It was good work. Steady. Respectable. The kind of job that didn't make your heart race, but kept your daughter fed and your health insurance active. And then 8 months ago, Claire Hamilton had been transferred in from the New York office as the new Director of Operations. Everything had changed. Not in the way people assumed, not the way the women in HR whispered about when they thought no one was listening. It wasn't that. It was subtler than that, and somehow worse. Claire Hamilton was relentless. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She communicated in expectations high, precise, and continuous. She sent emails at 10 p.m. and expected responses by 7 a.m. She ran meetings where every slide had to be pre-reviewed, every number had to be sourced, every answer had to be ready before the question was finished being asked. She was brilliant. He'd give her that. She was also, without question, the most exhausting person he had ever worked for. He stepped off the elevator on the 14th floor at 7:58 a.m. 2 minutes early, coffee in hand, and immediately heard his name. "Carter." He turned. Claire was already in the hallway, walking toward the glass conference room, with a tablet under one arm and a phone pressed to her ear. She didn't look at him when she said his name. She looked at the tablet, scrolling through something with her thumb. "The Harmon account. The restructured routing you proposed last week. I need updated projections by 10. "Good morning to you too." He said quietly enough that she could ignore it if she wanted to. She didn't ignore it. She stopped walking, looked up from the tablet for the first time, and fixed him with the steady measuring look that he privately thought could stop a freight train. "Good morning, Carter," she said, flat and perfectly controlled. "Updated projections, 10 o'clock. Then she walked into the conference room, and the glass door shut behind her. He exhaled through his nose, took a sip of his coffee. Around him, 2 junior analysts had watched the whole exchange and were now studying their shoes with great concentration. "Good morning, everyone," Ethan said, and walked to his desk. He finished the projections at 9:47. He sent them at 9:48. At 9:49 he received a reply, 3 errors in columns, DF and K, Redo. He stared at the email for a long moment. Then he opened the spreadsheet, found the errors. They were real. He could see that small formula misalignments that changed the output by less than 2%, and he fixed them. But his hands, while he fixed them, were not entirely steady. He'd had 4 hours of sleep. He'd been awake at 4 in the morning holding a 6-year-old who was still 3 years later, having nightmares about a woman who had walked out of their lives without a backward glance, and flown to Portland with a man named Derek, who sold software and didn't have children. He had fixed the spreadsheet, run the formulas, checked the projections, sent 47 emails, ridden a train, stood on a platform in 30-degree wind, and fed a small human scrambled eggs before 7 a.m. And he had 3 errors in columns, DF and K. He sent the corrected version at 10:02. At 10:03, "Thank you." 2 words. That was Claire Hamilton. He didn't tell people much about his life outside of work. He'd learned early that being a single dad in a corporate environment carried a specific kind of weight. A weight made heavier by the fact that no one quite knew how to hold it with you. When women found out, they looked at him the way people look at a stray dog in the rain. Soft eyes, gentle voices. "Oh, that's so hard. You're doing amazing." Which was kind, and also made him want to disappear. When men found out, most of them went quiet in a way that felt like discomfort, like his situation was a reminder of something they preferred not to think about. So he kept it contained. Work was work. Home was home. He was good at keeping those 2 things in separate rooms inside himself. He'd been doing it for 3 years. He was getting tired. On Thursday, the company-wide email arrived at 2:17 p.m. All regional managers and department heads are requested to attend the Meridian Annual Leadership Gathering, November 14th to 16th, at the Hamilton Family Estate, Galena, Illinois. Attendance is considered mandatory for senior staff. Formal dress required for Saturday dinner. Partners welcome. Ethan read it twice. Hamilton Family Estate. He glanced up at the glass conference room across the floor. Claire was in there, standing at the head of the table, presenting something to a group of senior directors. Her expression was composed and professional and gave away absolutely nothing. He looked back at the email. Partners welcome. He wasn't going to think about that. He hit delete, went back to the Harmon projections, and thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, after Lily was in bed and Mr. Biscuit had been tucked in beside her and the nightlight was on and the door was cracked just enough, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold and his phone face up in front of him. He had 2 missed calls from his Aunt Rosa. She'd been like a mother to him since his own mother passed when he was 17, sharp, loving, and completely incapable of keeping an opinion to herself. He called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "You're going to that work thing," she said, no greeting. "Hello, Rosa." "Don't hello, Rosa, me. I heard about it. Linda from your company, her daughter is in my book club. She said everyone's expected to go, partners and all." "I don't have a partner, Rosa." "I know you don't have a partner. That's what I'm calling about." He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. "Please don't. You're 39 years old. 29. And the last time you went on a date was when Lily was still in preschool, and before you say anything, helping a woman with her groceries at Jewel Osco does not count as a date, Ethan. I don't care how long you talked. That was once, and she was 80. She was 64, and she told me herself you were charming." A pause. "Are you eating?" Yes. Real food. Rosa. Lily told me you had cereal for dinner on Sunday. He closed his eyes. She's 6. She has no concept of cornflakes, Ethan. The girl said Daddy made cornflakes again like it was a weekly ritual. He said nothing. Go to the work thing, Rosa said, and her voice shifted softer now, the sharpness still there, but underneath it something warmer. Take Lily if you can. Let people see who you are outside that office. You hide too much of yourself. I don't hide. You fold yourself up like that resignation letter you keep carrying around and never send, and you call it being professional. A beat of silence. I love you, baby. But you have to stop disappearing. He held the phone long after she hung up the cold coffee in front of him and the hum of the refrigerator filling the kitchen, and thought about how his aunt always somehow knew about the letter. He'd never told her about the letter. The next morning, Friday, Ethan arrived at the office at 7:55 and found Claire Hamilton already in the break room, standing at the counter, her back to the door, both hands on the edge of the counter, head slightly bowed. Not on her phone, not reviewing anything, just standing there. Still. He hesitated at the doorway for exactly 1 second, long enough to understand he was seeing something she wouldn't want him to see. And then he walked in normally and moved to the coffee machine. She straightened, turned. Her expression reset so fast it was almost convincing. Carter. Ms. Hamilton. He poured his coffee. She picked up the mug she'd apparently already made and didn't drink it. The silence in the break room was a different kind of silence than the office, less structured, less professional. It had edges. Are you going to the Galena gathering? He asked, because it seemed like the safest thing to say, and also because he already knew the answer and couldn't explain why he wanted to hear her say it. It's at my family's estate, she said. So yes. Right. He put the lid on his cup. That makes sense. My family will be there. She said it like a warning, or maybe a concession, he couldn't quite tell. The whole family. It's connected to a family event happening that same weekend. She paused. My cousin's wedding. The rehearsal dinner is Saturday night. That sounds like a lot. She looked at him. Just for a moment, a flash of something real behind the composure, tired and unguarded, and there before she put it away again. It's fine, she said. It's manageable. Right, he said. She walked out of the break room with her mug. He stood at the counter and drank his coffee and thought that Claire Hamilton was one of the most controlled people he had ever watched be exhausted. He was at his desk at 4:47 p.m. Coat already unpacking his bag to get to Lily's school before aftercare ended at 5 when he heard his name from the direction of Claire's office. He turned. She was standing in the doorway. Do you have a minute? I have about 9, he said. I need to pick up my daughter. Something shifted on her face, a small recalibration like she'd been ready for an argument and didn't get one. I'll be quick. Her office was glass on 2 sides, which meant the entire floor could see into it, which meant every conversation Claire Hamilton had at her own desk was technically observable by anyone who cared to look. She sat down behind the desk. He stood. The glass caught the late afternoon light at a particular angle that made her look tired in a way fluorescent lighting didn't allow. The gathering next weekend, she said. I wanted to discuss it in the context of the Harmon account presentation since you'll be involved in that Saturday morning session. Ms. Hamilton, he said. She stopped. I have 8 minutes. If there's something else you wanted to talk about, you can say it. He watched her decide. He could see her doing it, the small war between the professional script and whatever was underneath it. He'd seen that war before in himself in the break room mirror at 6 in the morning when he was deciding whether to be honest or to just push through. She looked down at her desk, then up. My family has certain expectations, she said, about my personal life, at these events. She stopped, started again. My cousin's wedding has become something of a focal point for certain conversations I've been trying to avoid for approximately 2 years. About your relationship status, he said. Among other things. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure what you're asking me. I'm not asking you anything yet, she said quickly. I'm explaining a context, that's all, for now. He looked at her. She looked back. The whole floor probably looked like a very boring Friday afternoon on the other side of the glass. 7 minutes, he said. I have to go. She nodded. Go. We'll talk Monday. He got to aftercare with 3 minutes to spare. Lily came running out with a painting of a rainbow and a paper crown she'd made in art class, and she put the crown on his head in the middle of the pickup line, and 2 other parents laughed, and Ethan stood there with a paper crown on his head and his daughter's arms around his neck, and thought, whatever she's going to ask me, the answer is no. On Monday, Claire asked him. She walked to his desk at 11 a.m. with a cup of coffee, which she set in front of him, which had never happened in 8 months, and which caused the entire open floor to go very quietly and very carefully still. She pulled a chair to the side of his desk, not the front, the side, and sat down like they were about to have a normal work meeting. The gathering is 2 weekends from now, she said low enough that it wasn't broadcasting. My family will expect me to arrive with someone. Specifically, my mother has spent 3 months implying that if I show up alone again, she'll interpret it as an invitation to set me up with whichever colleague of my father's she's decided is appropriate this season. Ethan looked at the coffee cup in front of him. That sounds unpleasant. It's a predictable family dynamic that I manage poorly, she said. I'm aware of that. Okay. I would like to propose an arrangement, she said, and to her credit, her voice did not waver. For the weekend, professional in nature, a straightforward exchange. He leaned back slightly in his chair. I'm listening. You attend as my partner. We maintain a credible but appropriate dynamic for the duration of the event. In exchange, I will formally recommend you for the Senior Regional Director position opening in Q1, a role you've been qualified for over a year and which should have been offered to you 8 months ago. She paused. That last part is also accurate. I reviewed your file. He was quiet for a long moment. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend, he said. Partner, she said. The word boyfriend is imprecise. For a weekend, 2.5 days. At your family's estate, where the corporate gathering will also be taking place, yes. It serves both purposes. He looked at her. She met his eyes and held them. No performance in it, just the directness she always had stripped of the professional armor and somehow more exposed for it. My daughter, he said. Lily. She was supposed to come with me. My aunt was going to drive her out Saturday. She's welcome, Claire said without hesitation. There's space. Children attend these events. That stopped him. He'd expected the complication to be a wall. Instead, she'd opened a door. Why me? He said finally. She considered the question seriously, which he appreciated. Because you're competent and composed, and you don't perform, she said. And because I think you understand what it means to manage a life that doesn't look the way people expect it to. She looked down at her hands just briefly. And because I think you're tired of pretending everything is fine, too. He sat with that for a moment. This is a bad idea, he said. Probably, she said. Professionally, it's complicated, yes. And if something goes, I'll take full responsibility for the arrangement, she said. If anything becomes professionally problematic, the fault is mine. I proposed it. He looked at her, really looked the way he hadn't let himself look, because she was his boss, and he was careful, and he'd been careful for 3 years about everything. He thought about the resignation letter in his jacket pocket. He thought about Lily's paper crown. He thought about Rosa saying, you fold yourself up and call it professional. 2.5 days, he said. 2.5 days, she confirmed. And Lily comes. Lily comes. And we're clear that this is an arrangement, she said. Professional and temporary. Okay, he said. She stood, picked up her tablet, reset the composure like she was putting on a coat. Thank you, Carter. Yeah, he said. She walked back to her office. The floor slowly exhaled. Ethan looked down at the cup of coffee she'd left on his desk. Still warm. Professional and temporary, he thought, and didn't believe it even a little. The coffee was still sitting on his desk when Marcus leaned over from the adjacent workstation and said in a voice carefully pitched below the ambient noise of the office floor, "Did Claire Hamilton just bring you coffee?" Ethan didn't look up from his screen. "She set it down. That's not the same thing." "She walked to your desk, Ethan. She pulled up a chair. She sat down like a human person and talked to you for 4 minutes. Were you timing it?" "Jennifer was timing it. I was just watching." Marcus leaned closer. "What did she want?" "Work stuff." "Work stuff." Harmon account. Marcus leaned back slowly, the way a man does when he doesn't believe a word he's just heard, but respects the delivery enough not to push. "Okay," he said. "Work stuff." Ethan drank the coffee. It was good, better than the break room machine, which meant she'd gotten it from the cafe cart on the lobby level, which meant she'd thought about it before she came to his desk, which was a detail he was not going to spend any more time thinking about. He spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about it. By Wednesday, the arrangement had a shape. Not a formal one. Nothing written. Nothing signed. Nothing that could appear in an HR file, but a shape. Nonetheless, Claire had sent him a calendar invite for Thursday evening, described simply as Logistics Pre-Event Coordination, with a coffee shop address in Lincoln Park and a time of 6:30 p.m. He'd shown it to no one. He'd accepted it without reply. He told his aunt he needed her to take Lily Thursday evening, that it was a work meeting that ran late. Rosa said, "Of course, baby." And then after a pause, "Is it a date?" And he said, "It's a work meeting, Rosa." And she said, in the tone that meant she had already decided what it was, and nothing he said would change that. He got to the coffee shop at 6:22. He'd told himself he wasn't going to be early. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a corner table and was reading something on his phone that he couldn't retain a word of when Claire walked in at exactly 6:30, and the door brought a rush of November cold with her. She didn't look like his boss here. That was the first thing he registered, and it registered fast and uncomfortable the way a truth does when you weren't ready for it. She was in a dark coat, her hair down instead of pulled back, and she looked like a person instead of a director, and he had a brief and very inconvenient moment of not knowing what to do with that. She sat across from him, unwound her scarf, and put a small leather notebook on the table. "You're early," she said. "You're exactly on time." "I'm always exactly on time." She opened the notebook. "I made a list." "Of course you did." She looked up. "Is that going to be a problem?" "No," he said. "I respect a list. What's on it?" She turned the notebook slightly so he could see. He read it from across the small table. The handwriting was precise and slanted slightly to the right. The list said, origin story, relationship timeline, terms of address, physical boundaries, family dynamics mine, exit strategy. He read it twice. "Exit strategy," he said. "How we explain if things become complicated afterward. Professionally. And otherwise." He sat back, picked up his coffee. "Okay, walk me through it." She did. Methodically, clearly, without drama, the way she ran a meeting. Their origin story would be simple and close enough to true that neither of them would stumble over it. They'd met through work, they'd gotten to know each other slowly over the past several months. It had become personal, gradually. Nothing elaborate. Nothing that required remembering fictional details under social pressure. The timeline, she said, would be vague on purpose. "My family will try to pin down specifics. The safest answer is always, 'We've been figuring it out.' It's true enough, and it closes the question." "What do I call you?" he asked. "In front of your family." A pause. The first moment she hesitated. "Claire," she said. "Obviously." "I've never called you Claire." "I know. It's going to sound natural," she said. "It needs to sound natural, so you're going to have to practice." He looked at her. She looked back. Claire, he said. Something moved across her face, quick, controlled, but there. She blinked once. Good, she said, and looked back at the notebook. What about your family? He said. What do I need to know? This was where she slowed down. He could feel it, the first real hesitation, the place where the list met something she hadn't quite finished organizing. My mother is Margaret Hamilton, she said. She stopped. She's very good at finding the soft spot in a situation and pressing it. Not maliciously. She genuinely believes she's helping. Another pause. She'll ask about your daughter. Okay. She'll ask a lot about your daughter. About Lily's mother. She won't be subtle. I can handle that. She'll also, Claire set down her pen. She'll look for evidence that you're not serious, that I'm not serious, that this is another situation where I've chosen work over everything else and dressed it up as a relationship. She said it evenly, but the evenness was doing a lot of work. She's done this at every family event for 6 years. She's usually not wrong. He didn't say anything immediately because he could hear what was underneath, that the resignation, the old tired shape of a wound that had been reopened often enough that it had stopped bleeding and just ached instead. And your father, he asked. My father will shake your hand, ask where you went to school, and spend the rest of the weekend being politely neutral about everything. That sounds manageable. It is. He's the easier one. She picked up her pen again. My cousin Dana, whose wedding it is genuinely kind. She'll be glad I came. She's the reason I agreed to the family event at all. A brief softness crossed her face, real and unguarded there for just a moment. She's the only one who doesn't make me feel like a case study. He filed that away without comment. Physical boundaries, he said, reading from the list. She was very still for exactly 1 second. Appropriate for context. Hand, arm, normal public contact that reads as credible without requiring either of us to be uncomfortable. She said it like she'd rehearsed it. Maybe she had. Nothing that either party isn't willing to initiate themselves. Okay, he said. Are you? It's fine, he said. That's fine. She nodded, closed the notebook. Do you have questions about any of it? He thought for a moment. 1. Go ahead. Why does it matter to you? He said. Your family's opinion. You're a director at a major logistics firm. You're 30 whatever. 34. You're 34 and you run a department of 60 people, and you clearly don't care what anyone at that office thinks about you. So why does this? He gestured vaguely in the direction of the notebook. Why does this still have this much power? She looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that he thought she wasn't going to answer. Because they're the only people in my life, she said quietly, who knew me before I became good at not needing anyone. He didn't have a response to that. He wasn't sure one existed. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. The cafe moved around them, voices, the hiss of the espresso machine. Someone's phone ringing 2 tables over, and they sat with what she'd said until it settled. Okay, he said finally. I'm in. All the way in. We do this right. She looked at him. Not the director looked, the other one. The one from the break room. Thank you, she said, and meant it. He drove home that night and sat in the parking garage for 3 minutes before going upstairs, thinking about the way she'd said, they're the only people in my life who knew me before I became good at not needing anyone. And how that sentence had landed in his chest, like something he'd heard before in a language he thought was only his. He went upstairs. He checked on Lily, who was asleep with Mr. Biscuit, and a half-finished coloring book open on the pillow beside her. He tucked the book carefully off to the side, stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen table and took the resignation letter out of his jacket pocket. Unfolded it. Read it. He folded it back up and put it in the kitchen drawer instead of his pocket. He didn't know exactly why. It felt like a small decision. It felt somehow like more than that. The next 3 days had a structure that neither of them named, but both of them followed. He arrived at the office. She arrived at the office. Their interaction was exactly what it had always been: professional, efficient, direct, except that twice he caught her looking at him in a meeting in a way that was slightly different from looking, and once she paused at his desk to say something about the Harmon account and called him Ethan, and then immediately corrected to Carter and kept walking, and he pretended not to notice. On Saturday morning, 8 days before the gathering, he brought Lily to the grocery store. This was their ritual. Saturday grocery run, Lily in the cart making decisions about which cereal was acceptable. She was deeply committed to the process. She took it seriously. She cross-referenced by color and mascot with a rigor that would have impressed Claire Hamilton's spreadsheet sensibility. They were in the produce section when his phone buzzed. A text from Claire. It read, "My mother called. She wants a photo. For the family group chat. Is that, I understand if that's..." He read it. Read it again. He looked at Lily, who was holding a bunch of green grapes up to the light, with the expression of a scientist examining evidence. He looked back at the text. He turned the phone toward Lily. "Hey, Bug. Can I take your picture with these?" He held up a bag of apples she'd approved earlier. She immediately composed herself with the gravity of a professional portrait subject, grapes still in hand. He took 3 photos. In one of them, she was laughing because he'd made a face. He texted Claire back, "Better, give your mother this instead." He attached the photo of Lily laughing with the grapes. There was a long pause, long enough that he thought maybe he'd miscalculated, overstepped some boundary in the notebook he hadn't been aware of. Then her reply came. "My mother just sent 3 heart emojis. This is the most emotion she's expressed digitally since 2019. He laughed. Standing in the produce section alone, except for a 6-year-old with grapes, he laughed out loud. Lily looked at him. "What's funny, Daddy?" "Work stuff," he said. She accepted this with the profound disinterest of a child who had better things to think about and went back to the grapes. That evening, Claire texted again. She asked if Lily's coming. "I said yes." She said, and I quote, "Finally someone with sense." He typed back, "Should I be offended that the 6-year-old is more welcome than I am?" "You're both equally welcome. Lily is slightly more popular." Noted. "For what it's worth, I'm glad she's coming." A pause. Then, "I think it'll help, having her there." He stared at that for longer than he should have, then typed, "Me too," and put the phone face down on the counter. The Friday before the gathering, he and Claire did something neither of them had planned, and neither of them called a rehearsal. She'd sent a message at 4:50 p.m. asking if he had time to walk through a few logistics before the following weekend. He said sure, he'd be picking Lily up at 5 but could talk after. She said she'd walk with him. So Claire Hamilton, Director of Operations at Meridian Logistics, walked with Ethan Carter from the office building to the elementary school 3 blocks away, where they stood outside the pickup gate in the November cold, while 30 children erupted through the double doors, and Lily appeared in a paper turkey headdress she had made, and immediately ran, not just to Ethan, but also stopping herself at the last step, stared at Claire with the focused intensity only a 6-year-old can produce. "You're the lady from the picture," Lily said. Claire blinked. "What picture?" Ethan said carefully. "I don't know what picture." "Daddy's phone," Lily said cheerfully. "The lady on his phone. You have the same hair." She pointed at Claire's hair with the authority of someone who had solved a mystery. "See, Daddy, same hair." There was a silence that lasted approximately the length of a geological era. "I'm Claire," Claire said. She crouched down to Lily's level, in a single smooth motion coat, and all which Ethan had not expected, and which did something to his chest that he categorically refused to acknowledge. "Your turkey hat is excellent." "I made it," Lily said. "His name is Gerald." "Gerald is a very good turkey name." "I know." Lily looked at her for another moment with that unnerving childlike assessment that cannot be deflected or performed for. Then she reached out and took Claire's hand. Just took it, like it was the most natural thing. "Come on," she said. "We're going for hot chocolate. Daddy always gets hot chocolate on Fridays." Claire looked up at Ethan from her crouched position, one small hand clasped in hers, with an expression that was the most unguarded thing he'd seen on her face in 8 months. He shrugged. She's not wrong about the hot chocolate. They went for hot chocolate. All three of them. At the small cafe, 2 blocks from the school where Ethan always got the medium dark roast for himself and the kids' cocoa, with exactly 2 marshmallows for Lily and never anything else. Claire got a tea because of course she did, and Lily spent the entire 22 minutes explaining to Claire the complete and detailed biography of Mr. Biscuit, including his origin story, his medical history, and his preference for sleeping on the left side of the pillow. Claire listened to every word. Not with polite performance, actually listened, asked one follow-up question about whether Mr. Biscuit had ever been to a hospital, which sent Lily into a detailed explanation of the time he'd been accidentally put through the washing machine. And Claire said very seriously, "That must have been a difficult time for both of you." And Lily said it was, with enormous feeling. And Ethan sat across the table and watched his daughter talk to his boss like they'd known each other for years, and felt something shift inside him that he could not name and was not prepared for. When they walked out, Lily between them, she reached up without thinking and took both their hands. He and Claire both went still for exactly 1 step. Then, they both kept walking. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. Lily swung their arms once, got bored of it, and let go to run ahead to the corner. The walk continued. 3 adults, 2 of whom were pretending a lot of things, 1 of whom was 6 and pretending nothing at all. "She's remarkable," Claire said quietly after Lily was far enough ahead. "Yeah," he said. "She is." Another half a block of silence. "My mother is going to fall completely in love with her," Claire said. "Good," he said. "Then Lily can run interference and we can have a reasonable weekend." Claire made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. She stopped it just short, the way she stopped most things, catching it before it could go somewhere she hadn't planned. But he heard it, and he filed it away with everything else. The Sunday before they were supposed to leave, Claire called him at 9 p.m. He was on the couch with Lily, asleep against his shoulder, the TV on low, not watching it. He picked up quietly, shifting so he wouldn't wake her. "Hey. Hey." A pause on her end, unusual. Claire Hamilton did not do unstructured pauses. "I wanted to tell you something before we get there." "Okay, my mother." She stopped, started again. "She's going to ask about Lily's mother. At some point. Maybe the first 10 minutes. I know you said you can handle it, but I wanted to..." Another pause. "I wanted to make sure you knew that if you don't want to, you don't have to explain anything to anyone. I'll handle it. Whatever you need." He looked at Lily's sleeping face, the perfect ease of it, the total trust in the weight of her against him. Her name was Jessica, he said, not because he had to, because Claire had offered him a door, and he didn't want to take it without giving something back. "We were together 3 years. She left when Lily was 18 months old. She didn't want the life." He paused. "I don't blame her. I just..." He stopped. "You just had to keep being there," Claire said softly. "Yeah." A beat. "My last relationship," Claire said. "His name was Philip. He told me I was too focused on work to be someone's partner. That was 2 years ago." She paused. "He wasn't wrong. I didn't fight it." "Because he was wrong about the part that mattered," Ethan said without really deciding to. She was quiet. "What part? That being focused means you don't know how to care about someone. Those aren't the same thing." He felt Lily shift slightly against his shoulder, settled her back down. "Focused people care harder. They just need it to be worth it." The silence on the line was different from her office silences. Warmer, less defended. "We should sleep," she said finally. "Big week." "Yeah," he said. "Claire." Her breath caught, almost inaudibly. The name, his voice, her name, no professional distance in it, landed between them like something new. "Good night, Ethan," she said. He held the phone after she hung up and thought about how that was the first time she'd used his first name without correcting herself, and how that was probably not something either of them should read too much into, and how he was absolutely reading everything into it. On the Thursday before the gathering, the booking confirmation came through to the corporate travel coordinator and was quietly distributed to all attending staff. 3-page PDF. Room assignments, event schedule, parking instructions. He got to his room assignment on page 2. He read it once. He read it again. He walked across the floor to the travel coordinator's desk. Quietly, calmly. "Hey, Diane. The room assignments for Galena. Is this final?" Diane looked at the page he'd set down in front of her. "Far as I know. The estate sent them over directly, so if there's an issue, there's a..." He stopped. "There might be an overlap. I'll handle it. Thanks." He walked back to his desk, sat down, picked up his phone, typed a text to Claire. "Did you see the room assignments?" 3 seconds later, "I'm looking at them now." He waited. Her reply came. 1 sentence. "I'll call the estate coordinator." He typed, "Okay." 30 seconds later, another message from her. "They're fully booked. My cousin's wedding party took the overflow rooms." He stared at his phone. "So," he typed. "So," she replied. He put the phone down, picked it up again, typed, 2.5 days. Her response came back in under 10 seconds. 2.5 days. He sat at his desk and looked at nothing in particular, and felt the air in the room change in a way that had nothing to do with air conditioning, and everything to do with the fact that the careful structure they'd built, the list, the boundaries, the notebook, the professional distance they'd measured and agreed to, had just been handed 1 room, 1 booking error, and a weekend that was no longer going to go the way either of them had planned. The thing about a plan Ethan Carter had learned was that the moment it met real life, it became something else entirely. And 2.5 days in 1 room with everything they were both pretending not to feel, that wasn't a plan anymore. That was a reckoning. The drive to Galena took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Ethan drove. Claire sat in the passenger seat. Lily sat in the back with Mr. Biscuit a juice box and approximately 400 questions about where they were going, none of which she waited to have answered before asking the next one. "Is it a castle?" "It's an estate," Claire said. "What's an estate?" "A big house with a lot of land around it." "Like a farm." "Not exactly a farm." "Do they have animals?" "There's a dog. His name is Benson." Lily absorbed this. "Is Benson nice?" "Benson is very large and very friendly, and he will probably try to sit on you." "I want him to sit on me," Lily said with complete conviction. Ethan kept his eyes on the road and said nothing, because if he said anything, it would involve the word cute, and he wasn't going there. He'd made a list of his own, not on paper, not in a notebook, just in the back of his mind, a running catalog of things he was not going to let himself do this weekend. The list had started at 3 items on Thursday and was now at 11. Feeling things about the way Claire talked to his daughter was item 4. Noticing that she'd actually laughed the real version. Not the controlled professional exhale at something Lily said about Mr. Biscuit's opinion on road trips was item 7. The fact that she'd shown up at his apartment at 7:30 this morning with a travel coffee for him. No explanation, just handed it to him when he opened the door with Lily on his hip and bags at his feet that one didn't have a number yet. He was still deciding where it fit. They crossed into Galena County just after 11. Claire's phone had been quiet most of the drive, which he'd noticed, because normally it was not quiet. She was looking out the window at the bare November trees, with an expression he'd started to recognize, the one she wore when she was managing something internal and not quite winning. "You okay?" he said. She turned from the window. "Yes." That wasn't convincing. A pause. "My mother texted 20 minutes ago to say she'd told the whole family we were coming and that Dana wants to meet Lily before the rehearsal dinner." She looked back at the road ahead. "It's a lot of variables in a compressed timeline." "We can handle variables," he said. She glanced at him. "You say we very easily." "You said we first," he said. "In the office. The whole arrangement was framed as we." "That's..." She stopped. That's fair. From the back seat without looking up from Mr. Biscuit. Are you two arguing? No, they said simultaneously. Lily looked up, looked at the back of Claire's head, then at Ethan's eyes in the rearview mirror with the expression of a child who was not fooled. Okay, she said in the tone of someone granting a favor and went back to the rabbit. Claire made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time. She caught it but not fast enough. Ethan said nothing, filed it, moved on. The estate came into view just before 11:30, and before Ethan had fully stopped the car, the front door opened and a woman came down the steps. Early 60s cashmere coat posture so upright it was practically its own announcement, and he knew without being told that this was Margaret Hamilton. He had 5 seconds to collect himself. Margaret reached his door before he'd fully registered stopping the car. She didn't look at him first. She looked at Lily, who had pressed her face to the back window like a kid at an aquarium, and Margaret Hamilton's entire face changed. Something in the architecture of it, the controlled poise, the measuring eyes just opened. "Oh," Margaret said. "Look at you." Lily climbed out of the car with Mr. Biscuit and stood on the gravel drive with the complete social confidence of a 6-year-old who had never been intimidated by anyone in her life. "Hi, I'm Lily. That's my dad. Are you the grandma?" The silence that followed that question had a very specific texture. Claire stepped out of the passenger side and said very carefully, "Mom, this is Lily, and this is Ethan." Margaret looked at Lily for another 2 seconds, then turned to Ethan with an expression he hadn't anticipated. Not the measuring look he'd braced for, not the skeptical once-over. Something warmer and more complicated. She extended her hand. "Ethan, we've been looking forward to this." He shook it. Her grip was firm, direct. He recognized where Claire had gotten it. "Thank you for having us, Mrs. Hamilton." "Margaret," she said. She was already looking back at Lily. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Does Benson live here?" "He does." "Then yes, I'm hungry." Margaret took Lily's hand, just like Lily had taken Claire's outside the school, and walked her up the steps, asking questions about the drive, about Mr. Biscuit, about what Lily's favorite food was. Lily answered all of them at full volume and with complete accuracy, and Ethan stood on the gravel drive, watching his daughter be walked into a strange estate by a woman he'd met 40 seconds ago and thought somewhat helplessly that Lily was going to be fine. He was less certain about himself. Claire appeared at his elbow. Close enough that when she spoke, her voice was low and just for him. "Still with me?" "Yeah," he said. "She likes you," Claire said. "She hasn't looked at me long enough to have an opinion." "She hasn't looked at you that way, but she shook your hand like she meant it." He could feel her watching the door where her mother and Lily had disappeared. "Margaret Hamilton does not shake hands she doesn't mean." He picked up both their bags from the trunk. "And your father?" "Standing in the hall pretending to check his watch," she said. "He's been there since we pulled in. Do I have anything to worry about?" She reached out and took her own bag from him, not because she had to, just to take something. "Just don't say you went to Northwestern. He has strong opinions about Northwestern." "I went to DePaul." "Perfect," she said. "He'll respect that. He won't say so, but he will." They walked up the steps together, and the front door was open, and the weekend had officially started, and there was no version of the plan anymore. Just the two of them, walking into a house full of people who were about to watch every reaction between them for the next 2.5 days. He thought about the room assignment. 1 room, 1 bed, 2.5 days. He did not think about it after that. Or he tried not to. He was not entirely successful. The first 3 hours were managed chaos in the best possible way. Richard Hamilton, gray-haired, precise, exactly as advertised, shook Ethan's hand in the hallway and asked where he'd done his undergrad, with the particular inflection of a man who already knew the answer and was waiting to see if the answer matched the person. Ethan said DePaul Logistics and Operations Management. Richard nodded once, said practical choice, and that was the entire exchange. But as Claire had predicted, there was something in the nod that meant more than it showed. Lily had found Benson within 4 minutes and had been inseparable from him since. Benson was a large, gentle, slightly confused golden retriever who had no strong opinions about anything except belly rubs and the location of the nearest human lap. And Lily had decided he was her personal property for the duration of the weekend, with a decisiveness that brooked no argument. Dana Hamilton, the bride. Claire's cousin was exactly what Claire had described. Warm, immediate, the kind of person whose happiness was genuinely generous, rather than performed. She'd pulled Claire into a real hug the moment she saw her, the kind that lasted long enough to mean something, and Claire had let herself be held in it for just a moment before she composed herself again. Ethan had watched that too. Filed it. Item 9 on the mental list. The morning corporate sessions ran from 10 to 12:30 in the estate's formal meeting room. Projectors printed agendas, regional reports. Ethan sat 2 seats down from Claire and watched her run the room the way she always ran rooms, which was to say, completely and without appearing to. She asked questions that weren't actually questions. She redirected tangents with 2 words. She made every person presenting feel simultaneously that they'd done well and that they could do better. It was extraordinary to watch. It was also familiar enough that he could catch the micro moments where she was doing 2 things at once, running the room, and below that, managing something private that had nothing to do with regional logistics. She glanced at him twice during the 2.5-hour session. Both times it was brief, assessing the kind of check-in that wasn't about the Harmon account. Both times he held the look just long enough to say, "I'm here," without saying it. Both times she looked away first. Lunch was family style in the main dining room, which meant everyone at one table, which meant Ethan sat between Claire and Lily, who had brought Benson to the doorway and was feeding him table scraps with the quiet focus of someone who had been doing this for years and not for the first and last time this weekend. Margaret sat across from Ethan and asked him about his work with the measured interest of someone who had done her research. He answered directly without embellishment, and at some point he became aware that the directness was landing well, that what Margaret Hamilton apparently responded to was the same thing Claire responded to. No performance, no effort to impress, just the thing as it actually was. "Claire tells me you've been with Meridian 4 years, Margaret said. 4 years in March, yeah. And before that, trucking dispatch in Indiana. Before that, 2 years in the Army. Logistics Corps." A beat. Margaret glanced at her daughter, then back at Ethan. "You didn't mention that," she said to Claire. "It didn't come up," Claire said in a voice that meant it had come up and she'd chosen not to say it. Margaret looked at Ethan again. "Thank you for your service," said cleanly without the formulaic flatness the phrase sometimes carried. "It was a good education," he said. "Taught me how to move things efficiently under pressure. Everything since has been a variation on that." Margaret nodded slowly. The table had gone slightly quieter around them in that way that tables do when the most important conversation in the room happens to be happening at a particular end. Richard from the far end without looking up from his plate. "DePaul has an excellent operations program." Ethan said, "I thought so." Richard made a small sound that wasn't quite agreement, but was the closest thing to it he'd produced all day. Under the table, Claire's knee pressed briefly against his. Not an accident, not a gesture, just contact, small and there and gone, the kind of thing you do when someone is doing better than expected, and you want to say so without a word. He didn't move. She didn't move. The table talked on. The afternoon corporate sessions wrapped at 4, and by 4:15, the estate had shifted into wedding weekend mode. Florists arriving, Dana appearing in a different level of radiant energy. Margaret orchestrating 3 conversations simultaneously from the hallway. Ethan got Lily from where she'd been sitting with Benson and one of Dana's bridesmaids, who had decided Lily was the most charming person at the event and wasn't wrong, and he took her upstairs to get settled. The room was on the 2nd floor east side. He stood in the doorway for a moment before going in. 1 room, 1 window, 1 chair, 1 bed. A full, not a queen. Not that it mattered. The size wasn't the point. The singularity of it was the point, the simple physical fact of 1 bed in 1 room where 2 people were going to exist for 2 nights and pretend that everything between them was professional and temporary. Lily ran past him and threw herself onto the bed. "This is a good bed," she announced. Yeah, he said. Where does Claire sleep? He set the bags down. Here, with us. Lily considered this. Like a sleepover. Something like that. She accepted this immediately, which was one of the better qualities of being sick. Sleepovers were self-evidently good and required no further analysis. She pulled Mr. Biscuit from the bag and arranged him on the pillow and began investigating the room with the thoroughness of a small inspector. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the door and thought about how he was going to handle the next 48 hours, and came up with nothing useful. Claire arrived at 5:30. He heard her in the hallway first, the particular cadence of her walk which he apparently knew now which was on the list, and then the door opened and she came in and stopped when she saw the room with full clarity. She'd seen the confirmation on paper, but paper and reality were different things, and her face told him she was reconciling them. Lily, Ethan said, can you take Mr. Biscuit to see if Benson is in the hall? He might not be allowed upstairs, Lily said. Let's find out. She took the rabbit, opened the door, and disappeared into the hallway with the efficiency of a child on a mission. The door closed. He and Claire looked at each other across the room. I can sleep in the chair, he said. You're 6'1". You can't sleep in that chair. I've slept in worse. Army logistics, she said. I believe you, but you're not sleeping in the chair. She set her bag on the far side of the bed with the precision of someone establishing a boundary line on a map. It's a bed. We're adults. It's 2 nights. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. A beat. That was too easy, she said. Did you want an argument? No. I want... She stopped, pressed her fingers to her forehead for a moment just briefly, then dropped her hand. I want tonight to be manageable. The rehearsal dinner is in 2 hours. My Aunt Patricia will be there, and she has the conversational subtlety of a public announcement system. My mother has already texted me 6 times. Donna needs me calm and present, and She exhaled. I need one thing to not require management. He crossed to where she was standing, and she looked up at him, a reflex the slight adjustment in angle when he was close, and he said, Then I'm not a thing that requires management. Okay. For the next 2 days, that's off the list. She looked at him. Something in her face. The control, the managing just released like a breath she'd been holding since they pulled into the drive. Okay, she said. Quieter this time. Okay, he said. Lily reappeared. Benson is allowed upstairs. He's in the hall. He's very happy. Perfect, Claire said, and her voice was steady again, but the quality of the steadiness was different, lighter. Real. Let's get you ready for dinner. The rehearsal dinner was held in the estate's main hall, decorated with candles and the controlled elegance that Dana had apparently planned for 2 years, and that had survived 3 different florists and a near catastrophe with the centerpieces that Margaret referenced darkly, and everyone agreed not to ask about. There were 40 people. Ethan knew none of them. Claire knew all of them and had complicated histories with at least a third, which he understood from the micro-adjustments she made as they moved through the room, the way her posture shifted, depending on who was approaching, the slight change in the angle of her smile, the carefully calibrated warmth that was genuine in some places and professional in others. He watched her work in the room. It was a different kind of skill than the conference room, but the same precision underneath it, the same awareness, the same economy of energy. She never wasted a word. She never left an opening she didn't intend. But there were also moments, 2, 3 times, where someone said something, and instead of managing it, she just reacted. A laugh that came out before she could catch it. A moment where Dana said something quiet in her ear, and Claire put her head briefly on her cousin's shoulder without thinking about it. And he saw her realize she'd done it and then decisively, clearly not take it back. He was standing at the edge of the room with a glass of wine he was barely drinking when Aunt Patricia arrived. He knew it was her before Claire introduced them, because of the trajectory, a woman in her mid-60s with the forward momentum of someone who had been meaning to ask questions all day and was now going to ask them. You must be Ethan, she said with the warmth of someone who already knew the answer to every question she was about to ask. Claire's told us almost nothing about you, which means she's serious. Nice to meet you, he said. How long have you been together? We've been figuring it out, he said, which was Claire's line, and he watched Patricia process the deliberate vagueness of it with the practiced eye of someone who had been hearing evasion for 60 years. She looks different, Patricia said, glancing across the room to where Claire was talking to Dana. She looks less armored. That's a good sign. He followed her gaze. Claire was laughing at something Dana had said full real. The version he'd started to understand was the one she only let out when she forgot to be careful. And she was right. She did look different. Whether that was the weekend or the family around her or something else entirely, he couldn't say. She's good, he said, simply. Patricia looked at him for a moment with the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who didn't miss things. Yes, she said. I think she is. Dinner was long and layered, and the wine was good. And somewhere around the second course, Lily, who had been seated between Ethan and Dana, which Dana had arranged specifically because she'd already decided Lily was her favorite person at the table, fell deeply, catastrophically in love with the breadbasket and had to be gently redirected by Ethan twice and by Claire once, and the redirections all looked to anyone watching exactly like what they were. Two people co-parenting a small, bread-obsessed human with the easy coordination of people who'd been doing it together for years. That was what Margaret saw. He caught her watching them, not evaluating, not measuring, just seeing. After dinner, when the evening had moved into the soft, wine-loosened register that follows a good meal among people who are mostly glad to be together, Ethan found himself in the hallway alone for the first time in 5 hours. He'd taken Lily up to the room 20 minutes earlier. She'd been asleep before he'd finished the second page of her bedtime book and come back down to give Claire room to be with her family without managing him at the same time. He was standing near the hall window when Claire found him. You disappeared, she said. Gave you space. She stopped next to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her in the cool air of the hallway. You didn't have to do that. I know. A pause. Dana loves Lily, she said. Lily loves Dana and Benson and the breadbasket equally, and with her whole heart. Claire smiled, looked at the dark window. My mother pulled me aside after dinner. Okay. She said, a breath. She said she hadn't seen me look like myself in years. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't know how to respond to that. He waited. Because I don't know if she's right, she said. I don't know if this is... She gestured between them, a small motion imprecise for someone who was usually precise. Real or performed at this point. I've been in it long enough that I can't... She stopped. I can't see the seam anymore. He looked at her. The hallway was quiet around them. The dinner noise muffled through two closed doors, and in the low light, she looked like the woman from the break room and the coffee shop and the produce section and the Friday afternoon walk, all of them at once. That's the thing about a seam, he said. When you can't see it anymore, it's usually because it closed. She looked at him. And for once she didn't manage what was on her face. It was just there, the understanding and the fear of it, and underneath both of those, something quieter and more certain. Ethan, she said. I know, he said. We said, I know. This is, I know Claire. She exhaled, looked away, then back. I'm going to go say goodnight to Dana. Okay? Don't... She stopped. Don't be asleep when I get up there. It wasn't a request. It was something else. He wasn't sure she knew that. I won't, he said. She walked back toward the noise and the warmth and the family, and he stood at the hallway window and looked at nothing, and felt the ground beneath him shifting in a way that had nothing to do with where he was standing, and everything to do with what was happening inside him. Something he'd buried for 3 years under early alarms and scrambled eggs and resignation letters he couldn't hand over. He went upstairs. He checked on Lily, deeply asleep. Mr. Biscuit in the crook of her arm. Face completely peaceful. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and listened to her breathe for a moment, the way he did every night, the ritual that reminded him what all of it was for. Then he moved to the chair, Not to sleep, just to sit, and waited. Claire came in at 11:40. She moved quietly in the dark, aware of Lily. She set something on the dresser, took off her heels, and then stopped registering him in the chair. "I told you not to sleep in the chair." "I'm not sleeping." She moved to the bed, sat on the far side. He heard her exhale, the kind that carries a whole day in it. For a long time, neither of them said anything. The room was dark, Lily's breathing the only sound. Then Claire said quietly, "I don't actually know how to do this." "Do what?" "This." Her voice was low, careful not to wake Lily. "Whatever this is, I know how to run things. I know how to produce results, and manage expectations, and deliver under pressure." A pause. "I don't know how to just be in a room with someone, without an agenda." "You're doing it right now," he said. She was quiet. "You've been doing it for 2 weeks," he said. "At the coffee shop, on the walk to school, at the cafe with Lily." He leaned forward slightly in the chair. "You've been practicing it and you keep pretending you're not." "That's not what—" She stopped. "Claire." Her name in the dark, no distance in it. "You're allowed to not have an agenda." He heard her shift on the bed. "It's not safe," she said. And it wasn't about safety. In any physical sense, it was something older than that, worn into the shape of the word by years of learning that needing things was a liability. "I know," he said, because he did know. He knew it from the inside out. She was quiet again. A long minute of it. He stayed in the chair. Didn't push. Didn't move toward her. Let the dark do what dark does, take the edges off things. Make space for what won't fit in daylight. And then she said very quietly, "Can you just sit on the bed?" "You don't have to. I just don't want to talk to you across a room anymore." He got up, moved to the bed, sat on the edge closest to where he'd been, a careful distance between them, in the dark, Lily's breathing steady on the other side. Nothing happened. And everything happened, the closing of a distance that had nothing to do with space, the silent renegotiation of an arrangement that had already outgrown its terms. He was sitting there thinking about nothing specific, and everything simultaneously when her hand found his back. Not a romantic gesture, not intentional in the way that word usually means. It was the kind of touch that happens when someone reaches toward the nearest solid thing in the dark, reflexive human, the way you reach for a wall when the ground moves. Her fingers rested against his spine, light and certain, and she said nothing, and he said nothing, and the room was very still. He felt her exhale against the dark. And he understood with complete clarity, the kind that arrives without warning and without mercy, that this was no longer anything like pretending. He woke at 5:14. The alarm hadn't gone off. It never needed to. For a moment he didn't move, just lay still in the gray, pre-dawn dark, the way he did every morning in his apartment on the north side, those 30 seconds that belonged to no one else. Except this morning the ceiling was different, and the room was different, and there was the soft sound of Lily breathing on one side of him, and something else on the other side, something warm and present, and he turned his head carefully. Claire was asleep. That was the simple fact of it. She was on her side, facing away from him, her hair loose across the pillow, and she was asleep in the way that people sleep when they've stopped managing completely, without architecture, without the composed precision that followed her through every waking hour. She looked younger. She looked like someone who had, for a few hours at least, set down everything she was carrying. He looked at her for exactly as long as it took to understand that he was in serious trouble. Then he got up very quietly and went to the bathroom, and stood at the sink with the cold water running, and thought about the conversation from the office 2 days ago. The notebook with its list, the words professional and temporary that he had said, and she had confirmed, and that neither of them, he was now certain, had believed for more than about 48 hours. He thought about her hand on his back in the dark, light and certain and reflexive, like reaching for a wall when the ground moves. He turned off the water, looked at himself in the mirror, said out loud quietly so no one could hear, "This is a problem." Then he went back in, sat in the chair, and waited for the day to start. It started at 6:12 when Lily sat up in bed with full operational energy and announced that she was hungry and that Benson was probably also hungry and that they should both be addressed immediately. Claire stirred, turned, opened her eyes. She and Ethan looked at each other across the room for exactly 1 second. The kind of second that contains a full paragraph of unspoken things, and then Lily said, "Good morning, Claire," with the volume of someone who had never heard of an inside voice, and the second ended. "Good morning, Lily," Claire said, and sat up, and her voice was already steady, already composed. The director reassembled between one breath and the next. Only her eyes hadn't caught up yet. For just a moment, before the composure closed over them, he saw what was underneath. Not fear, not regret. Just the raw truth of someone who had woken up in a situation they hadn't predicted and weren't sure how to categorize. He knew the feeling. He was in it. "I'll take her down," he said. Claire nodded. "Give me 20 minutes. He took Lily downstairs, found Benson in the kitchen, where the estate's housekeeper had already been up for an hour and had coffee made and was entirely unbothered by a 6-year-old and a large golden retriever arriving at 6:15. Lily ate toast. Benson was given his breakfast and received it as though he'd been waiting his whole life for this specific moment. Ethan drank his coffee and looked at the window and tried to think forward practically about what the day required. Corporate session from 9 to 11. Wedding ceremony at 2. Reception dinner at 6. They had to hold the arrangement through all of it. The performance, the credible warmth, while simultaneously being at least 12 hours away from what had happened in that room in the dark, which had not been part of the arrangement and could not be undone. He was on his second cup when Claire appeared at the kitchen doorway, fully composed, coat hair. Back expression clean, and he understood that she had used those 20 minutes to rebuild the distance, to put the professional armor back on, to make this manageable. He understood it. He also felt it like a door closing. Lily held up a piece of toast in her direction. "Claire, this is good toast." "High praise," Claire said. She poured coffee and sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table and didn't look directly at him, and he didn't push it. He let the morning be what it needed to be. They had a whole day ahead, and the day had a structure, and the structure would carry them if they let it. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted at 6:20 on a Saturday morning in November, was that the structure was about to develop a significant crack. The crack appeared at 8:47. He was coming down the hall from checking the corporate session materials when he heard his name. Not Ethan Carter. The specific register of it, professional and slightly strained, told him before he turned around. It was David Marsh. Regional VP New York office. The kind of man who wore authority like a suit 2 sizes too large. He'd been at dinner the night before a corporate attendee, one of Claire's organizational superiors, and he had watched the table with the attentive quiet of someone cataloging things. "Carter." Marsh fell into step with him. "Good morning." "Good morning." "Sleep well." "Fine, thanks." A pause that had something calculated in it. "Interesting arrangement," Marsh said. "You and Hamilton." Ethan kept walking. "Is it?" "She's your direct superior. You run under her department." Marsh said it conversationally, which made it worse. "People notice these things. Professionally, I mean." Ethan stopped walking, turned to face him. "Is there something specific you want to say, David?" Marsh smiled, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. "Just making conversation. It's a small world, corporate logistics. Things get around. I'd just think carefully. About optics. Both of you." He said it the way a man says a thing when he wants it heard as advice and felt as a threat. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you for the input," he said, and walked away. He didn't tell Claire immediately. He needed 2 minutes first. 2 minutes to let the adrenaline settle, to decide what the information meant and how much weight to give it and whether it changed anything. He stood outside the meeting room with his coffee and ran the math. Marsh had senior authority. He had the kind of access that could, if he wanted to use it, make a report. Flag the relationship, the appearance of one as a potential ethical conflict. He might not. He might be posturing. But the fact that he'd said it at all meant the weekend had already been seen and interpreted and filed somewhere. The meeting room door opened and Claire stepped out. She read his face in under a second. "What happened?" "Marsh," he said low. "He made a comment about optics." Her expression did something he hadn't seen before, not fear, but something adjacent. A particular kind of tiredness, the kind that comes from fighting a battle you've been losing for a long time. "What did he say?" Ethan repeated it word for word. He watched her face while he did. She was quiet for a moment. "He's been building a case for reorganizing my department since July," she said. "He needs a reason. He's been looking for one. And we just gave him one." She looked at him directly. "No, we gave him something he thinks he can use. That's different." Her jaw was set. "He's not going to take it further." "How do you know that?" "Because if he reports it, I report the conversation he just had with you, which is demonstrably coercive, and he knows that." She said it with the flat certainty of someone who had been 3 steps ahead of this specific game for months. He was testing the water, seeing if he could rattle us. "Did it work?" "Not on me," she said. Then carefully, "Did it work on you?" He thought about the resignation letter in the kitchen drawer back home. He thought about 4 years of careful professional distance and 37 emails before 8 a.m. and Lily's drawing taped to his monitor, and the reason he'd never sent that letter. "No," he said. She held his eyes for a moment. Something passed between them that was not professional and not performed. Then she said, "Corporate session starts in 12 minutes." And went back into the room, and he followed her, and for 2 hours they ran the room like 2 people who had never once shared a bed or a silence or a touch in the dark, which was exactly what they'd agreed to do and which required more of him than he'd anticipated. The corporate session ended at 11:15. Lily had spent the morning with Dana and one of the bridesmaids who had fully adopted her for the weekend, and when Ethan came out, she ran at him from across the entry hall, and he caught her and she said, "Dana's dress has 100 buttons. Daddy, I counted 20 and then lost count, but it's probably 100. And he said, "Probably." And held her, and over the top of her head met Claire's eyes, and the morning's tension broke like a fever. Claire reached over and fixed Lily's collar, which had turned up. Just fixed it, without thinking. He watched her hand, the same hand that had rested against his back in the dark, straighten the collar of his daughter's dress with the ease of someone who had done it before, who had been doing it not in practice, but in real life, in the small accumulated moments of the past 2 weeks. Lily didn't even look up. She just let it happen. The way she'd taken Claire's hand outside the school. The way she'd sat between them at dinner. The way she'd said, "Are you two arguing?" in the back seat, with the resigned tone of someone who'd heard that particular silence before. Lily was 6 years old, and she'd been watching things and not saying what she saw, and she saw plenty. The wedding ceremony was at 2 p.m. in the estate's formal hall, seated in rows, and by some arrangement of Providence, or his own careful instinct, Ethan ended up on the aisle with Lily beside him and Claire on his other side. Lily sat still through the whole ceremony, which was unusual, and which he attributed to the fact that Dana was at the front in the dress with the 100 buttons, and Lily was deeply invested in the structural integrity of each one. Halfway through the ceremony, Lily put her head against his arm. He put his arm around her, and then a few minutes later, without any particular drama, Claire put her hand over his, where it rested on the armrest between them. Not a gesture, not a performance. There was no one watching them specifically in this moment. Everyone was watching Dana. Just her hand over his. Her thumb across his knuckles once. He turned his palm over. She didn't pull away. They sat like that through the vows, through in sickness and in health, through I choose you every day, through Dana's voice breaking on the words and the guests going soft and Lily whispering, "Why is she crying if she's happy, Daddy?" And him whispering back, "Sometimes happy feels so big it needs somewhere to go." And Claire's hand was in his, and neither of them said anything about it. And it was the most honest thing that had happened all weekend. The reception dinner that evening was different from the rehearsal dinner in every way that mattered. The rehearsal had been organized, seated, structured. The reception was looser tables and dancing and toasts that went 3 minutes long, and music that started formal and got less formal as the wine continued, and people who'd been careful all day stopped being careful. Margaret Hamilton, who had spent the better part of the weekend measuring Ethan with the precision of a woman who had been disappointed before and was determined not to be, again found him at the edge of the dance floor during a song that had cleared the older generation from it. "May I say something direct?" she said. "Please," he said. "I've watched her for 34 years," Margaret said. "I know every version of her. I know the version she shows in boardrooms, and the version she shows when she thinks no one important is watching, and the version she was before she decided that needing things was a weakness." She looked at him with the particular clarity of a woman who had earned it. "I've only seen one other person make her forget which version she's supposed to be using at any given moment." He waited. "Her father," Margaret said. "When she was 9. She'd follow him around the garden on Saturday mornings, and she'd just talk. No agenda, no performance. She'd just talk." She paused. "She's been talking to you the same way, since you arrived. I've been watching." He wasn't sure what to say. He stopped. "She's remarkable." "I know that," Margaret said. "Does she?" He looked across the room to where Claire was dancing with Dana. Both of them laughing, Claire's face open in the way it was only when she forgot to manage it and thought about her saying, "I don't know if she's right," in the hallway the night before, about whether she actually looked like herself. "Not consistently," he said. Margaret nodded. "That's your job then," she said, simply, like it was the most obvious thing. She walked away, and he stood at the edge of the dance floor thinking about whether he'd been given an instruction or an observation, and concluded it was probably both. The toast came at 9. Dana's new husband James gave one that was loving and simple and made Dana cry again. Dana's maid of honor gave one that was funny and warm and revealed 3 stories about Dana that would probably live in family mythology for decades. Then Dana stood up and said she wanted to say something about the people in the room who'd shown up not just for the wedding, but for her specifically by name. She said Claire's name, said it with the particular weight of someone who means every word and knows it. "My cousin has spent most of her adult life being the most capable person in any room she walks into," Dana said. "And I have watched that be a lonely thing to be. So when she walked in yesterday and I saw her face," Dana stopped, collected herself. "I just want her to know that this is what it looks like when you let people in. I hope she keeps the view." The room was quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real happens inside them. Ethan was not looking at Dana. He was looking at Claire, who was looking at her plate, her jaw tight, holding it together with the same composure she held everything except that her eyes were bright, and she was losing the battle, and she knew it, and so did he. He put his hand on the table between them, not reaching for her, just there, available. She looked at his hand, then at him. Then she put hers over it for the second time today. Except this time, there was no ceremony cover, no ambiguity, no performance that either of them could point to. Just her hand over his at a table full of people she loved and feared in equal measure, and his hand steady underneath. Nobody said anything about it. But the table saw. He knew the table saw. He was glad. The night wound down slowly, the way good nights do not. Abruptly, not with a clear ending, just a gradual softening as people began to drift. Lily had been asleep against Dana's bridesmaid for 2 hours and had been transferred to Ethan's arms with the smooth, practiced ease of a man who had done this transfer in restaurants and cars and countless other people's houses for 6 years. He carried her up the stairs at 10:30, with Claire beside him, both of them quiet. They got Lily into the bed, arranged Mr. Biscuit beside her, pulled the blanket up. The routine they'd done separately for years, done together now, without discussion or instruction, just falling into the rhythm of it like they'd always shared it. They both stepped back. The room was dim, Lily's breathing already deep. Claire sat on the edge of the bed on her side. He sat on his. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Claire said, "Marsh filed something." He went still. When? This afternoon. Marcus texted me. He has contacts in HR. A flag. Relationship disclosure. Possible conflict of interest. She said it flat, controlled her director voice, the one that didn't show blood. It's not a formal complaint yet. It's a flag, a precautionary notation. He looked at her. Okay. It's not okay, she said. If it becomes formal, they'll review my department. They'll look at your performance reviews, your promotions, your Claire. She stopped. Is any of it actually a conflict? He said. Any of it, the work, the evaluations, the Harmon account. Is any of it compromised? She looked at him. No, all of it is legitimate. Then it's manageable, he said. You're using my word. It's a good word. She looked at her hands. He could see her running the calculation, not the emotional one, the strategic one, the 37 emails before 8 a.m. version of Claire that didn't stop working even when the rest of her wanted to. The cleanest resolution, she said slowly, would be for me to disclose formally and recuse from your direct evaluations going forward. Transfer your line management to the VP level. Okay, he said. That's not... She looked up. That's a significant step. That's acknowledging that we're not pretending anymore, he said. The words sat in the room. She didn't deny it. That was what he noticed. She heard it, and she didn't deny it. And in the space where the denial should have been there was just the truth sitting quietly waiting. I told you in the cafe, she said finally. This was professional and temporary. You believed that for about 2 days, he said. Maybe 3, she said, and there was a ghost of something, not quite a smile, but adjacent. Claire. He shifted to face her more directly on the bed. I'm not asking you for anything right now. Tonight. This is not me pressing you toward a decision. But I need you to know what's real for me, so you have the actual information. She looked at him steadily. What's real for me, he said, is that somewhere between the coffee you set on my desk and the way you crouched down to Lily's level outside the school and the thing you said in the coffee shop about the only people who knew you, before somewhere in there, this stopped being anything I can file professionally. She was very still. And I know that complicates things, he said. I know it cost you professionally, and it costs me professionally, and I know you didn't design any of this. Neither did I. He held her eyes. But I'm done pretending I don't know what I know. The silence after that was the longest one they'd had. Longer than the break room. Longer than the hallway. Longer than the dark of the previous night. Then Claire said very quietly, when I was in the boardroom in New York, before they transferred me to Chicago, I had a window that faced south. I'd work until 9:10 p.m. The building would empty out. And I'd sit there and watch the lights and think that this was what I'd worked for, all of it, and try to figure out why it felt like holding something that didn't have a temperature. A pause. It wasn't bad. It was just complete, and completely empty at the same time. He waited. I don't feel that way right now, she said. I haven't felt that way and I don't know exactly when it started. I know when it started for me, he said. When? The break room. A Friday morning. You were standing at the counter with both hands on the edge and your head down, and you thought no one important was watching. She looked at him. That was 8 months ago. I know. You've been careful, he said. I've been careful. Because you were my boss, and I was a single dad with 4 hours of sleep and a resignation letter in my pocket, and I needed the job. So I was careful. He met her eyes. I'm not interested in being careful about this anymore. Something broke open in her face. Not dramatically, not in pieces, but the way ice breaks in late March, the whole surface shifting at once, the thing underneath suddenly visible. Ethan? She said. Yeah, he said. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face. His jaw. Just held it there. He felt her breath. He felt every careful decision of the last 8 months dissolve in the simple, specific warmth of her hand. I'm terrified, she said quietly. I know, he said. Me too. I don't know how to do this without... You already are, he said. You've been doing it. You're doing it right now. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she dropped her forehead to his shoulder, not a gesture, not a performance, just the weight of her finally put down somewhere. He put his arm around her. She let him. They sat like that for what might have been 5 minutes or 30. Lily breathed steadily across the room. Outside, the last of the wedding music had gone quiet. The house had gone quiet. The weekend was almost over. He thought about Monday. He thought about the office, the glass walls, the open floor, the 47 emails, the way the whole building would recalibrate around whatever had shifted between them. He thought about Marsh and the flag in HR and the strategic conversation they'd have to have and the professional navigation ahead of them and all the ways this was harder in daylight than in the dark. He thought about all of it. And underneath all of it, steadier than any of it, was the simple fact of her weight against his shoulder and the way she had stopped managing herself for the first time in as long as either of them could remember. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He looked at it without moving. A text from Rosa. "How's the work trip, baby?" He thought for a moment, then typed one-handed. It got complicated. Rosa's response came back in 11 seconds flat. Good. Complicated or bad complicated? He looked at Claire, who had not moved, who was still there, who had stopped pretending and stopped performing and stopped running the calculation and was just here, present, real. He typed, good. Rosa's reply, I knew it. I called it in September. You owe me $20. He put the phone face down. Claire said, muffled against his shoulder, Was that your aunt? Yes. What did she want? To collect a bet. She made a small sound, almost a laugh. Almost. The real one, the version she couldn't catch. She bet on us, Claire said. She bet on everything, he said. She's usually right. A pause. Then Claire said, I think I'd like to meet her. He held that for a moment. The size of it, what it meant that she'd said it, what it meant that he wanted it too, what it meant that they were having this conversation at all, after an arrangement that had begun with a notebook and a list, and the words professional and temporary. She'd like you, he said. She'd also tell you everything embarrassing about me within the first 20 minutes. Good, Claire said. I want the full version. He smiled at the ceiling. Let it go unguarded. Let it be exactly what it was. Then his phone buzzed again. He looked. Not Rosa this time. Marcus. Bro, don't come in Monday without calling me first. Things are moving fast on the Marsh situation. I need to brief you before you walk through the door. HR isn't the only department that got a memo. He stared at the message. Read it twice. He set the phone down face up this time so he wouldn't ignore it. Claire felt the change in him. He knew she did because she lifted her head and looked at his face and then at the phone. She read the message. Her face didn't change, but the quality of the stillness shifted. It's escalating, she said. Yeah. Faster than I expected. Yeah. She sat up, straightened. The composure came back, not like a wall this time, more like a spine. All right, she said. Then Monday has a different shape than we thought. She looked at him directly. But it doesn't change what we just said. No, he said. It doesn't. I'm going to handle Marsh, she said. That's my problem. I built the exposure, I manage the consequence. We built it, he said. She opened her mouth to argue. He could see it and then stopped and accepted it. We built it, she said. We manage it. Together, he said. The words settled between them like something placed carefully on a shelf, not fragile, but held with intention. She nodded, once. Then looked at Lily, and her expression did the thing it always did when she looked at Lily, opened quietly like a window. She's going to ask about next Saturday, Claire said. When we get back, she's going to want to know if we're doing hot chocolate. He looked at his daughter's sleeping face. Probably. What do I tell her? He looked at Claire. Tell her yes, he said. Tell her we're doing hot chocolate. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she lay back on her side of the bed, facing the ceiling, and said to the dark above her, Okay. He lay back on his side. The room was quiet. The weekend was over. And whatever was going to happen Monday, the memos, the HR flag, the building recalibrating David Marsh and his calculated optics, and his case building, all of it was real, and all of it was coming, and none of it, not one piece of it, was going to make him undo the last 48 hours. Some things he'd learned cost exactly what they cost, and you paid it anyway. Because the alternative was the resignation letter in the drawer. The alternative was cornflakes on Sunday. The alternative was 30 more years of being careful about the wrong things. He thought about what his aunt had said. You fold yourself up and call it professional. He thought about the woman 3 inches away from him in the dark. He wasn't folding, not tonight, not anymore. Monday arrived, the way bad weather does not, as a surprise, but with a specific weight that you feel before it actually lands. Ethan drove Lily to school at 7:15. She was still talking about Benson. She had decided somewhere between Galena and Chicago that Benson was her best friend, and that they should get a dog, and she made this case with the sustained logical commitment of someone who had been building the argument since Sunday morning and was not going to drop it. Benson is very lonely without me, she said. Benson has an entire estate to live in. That's not the same as a friend. You're right, he said. It's not. She looked at him, 6 years old, and she heard everything. Are you sad, Daddy? No bug. You have your thinking face. I'm just thinking. About work. A little. She was quiet for a moment. Then, is Claire going to be at your work today? Yeah, he said. She will. Lily absorbed this with the satisfied air of someone whose follow-up question had been preemptively answered. Good, she said, and went back to the dog argument. He dropped her at the gate, watched her run in, stood on the sidewalk for an extra 10 seconds. Then he called Marcus. Marcus picked up on the first ring, which meant he'd been waiting. Okay, so here's what happened. He talked fast. Marcus always talked fast when things were bad, like speed would outrun the information. Marsh sent a formal disclosure request to HR on Saturday evening. Not just a flag, a full request for review. He's citing potential bias in performance evaluation and departmental resource allocation going back 14 months. Ethan started walking toward the L station. 14 months. He went back through every decision Claire made that touched your department. Every contract, every staffing decision, every budget line. He's been building this for a year, at least. And here's the part I needed to tell you before you walked in. There's a meeting this morning. 9 a.m. HR and the executive committee. Claire's already been notified. You're on the list too. He stopped walking. I'm on the list. As a party to the disclosure. Not as someone in trouble, they phrased it as a courtesy inclusion. But Ethan... Marcus dropped his voice. Marsh is in that meeting. He's presenting. He stood on the sidewalk with the November cold and the commuter noise and the full weight of what Marcus was describing and thought about Claire in the kitchen this morning. She'd texted at 6:50, I know, I already have counsel reviewing. Don't say anything until we've spoken. Clean, direct, 3 steps ahead. Pure Claire Hamilton. He typed back, on my way, don't let them start without me. Her response? They won't. I'll make sure of it. He got to the office at 8:42. The floor was already tense in the specific way that open-plan offices get tense when something is happening behind closed doors that everyone can sense and nobody is discussing out loud. He walked to his desk, put down his bag, and looked across the floor at Claire's office. She was on the phone, standing at her window, back to the glass. Suit, hair up, posture like a wall. He watched her and thought about her forehead against his shoulder 2 nights ago and felt the distance between that and this like something physical. She turned, saw him. One nod, small, controlled the professional version of everything they'd agreed on. And underneath it, the other version, the one only he knew how to read now. He nodded back. At 8:55, HR sent a building message to both their phones simultaneously. Conference room B, 9th floor, 9 a.m. He was already moving. The conference room had 8 people in it by the time he arrived. HR Director Linda Cho at the head. Two members of the executive committee he recognized from annual reviews. An outside counsel he didn't recognize. David Marsh, seated to the left with a folder in front of him, and the composed expression of a man who had prepared for this and thought he'd won before it started, and Claire. Seated on the right side of the table, also with a folder, also composed, also prepared, but her composure was a different quality from Marsh's. His was the composure of offense. Hers was the composure of someone who had absorbed worse and was still standing. Ethan sat next to her. Not across from her, not at a neutral point next to her. She didn't look at him, but he felt her shoulders release half a degree. Linda Cho opened the meeting with the particular precision of someone who knew that every word in this room was going to be documented and weighed. She outlined the disclosure, the scope of the review, the timeline Marsh had submitted. She was careful to clarify that no finding had been made, that this was a preliminary review conversation, that all parties were present to provide information, not to receive judgment. Then she turned to Marsh. He presented for 11 minutes. Ethan counted. He had slides, actual slides, a prepared deck, which meant he'd built this before the weekend. Probably before Galena, which meant the weekend had been a targeted opportunity, not a spontaneous observation. Every performance review, every budget allocation, every staffing decision Claire had made in Ethan's department for 14 months mapped against their, as Marsh framed it, undisclosed personal relationship. He used the word undisclosed 4 times. Ethan felt his jaw tighten and deliberately relaxed it. When Marsh finished, Linda turned to Claire. Claire opened her folder. She spoke for 8 minutes. She did not use slides. She didn't need them. She had documented every decision Marsh had cited with the original business justification, the supporting data, the sign-off chain, and in 3 cases, the explicit approval of the executive committee member currently seated in this room. She presented it the way she presented everything, methodical, sourced, unarguable. Then she said, "I want to address the disclosure question directly." Linda nodded. "My relationship with Mr. Carter moved from professional to personal during the first week of November," Claire said. "I was in the process of preparing a formal disclosure to HR when this review was initiated. I have documentation of that preparation." She slid a single page across the table, a draft disclosure letter timestamped October 31st. "I was not attempting to conceal. I was navigating a situation that developed in a way I did not anticipate, and I was doing so with the intention of following proper process." She looked at Marsh directly. "What I was not anticipating was someone else filing a disclosure as a competitive instrument before that process was complete." The room was very quiet. Marsh said, "I filed out of concern for—" "You filed on a Saturday evening from a family estate where you had spent the prior 24 hours socially observing 2 colleagues," Claire said. "The timing and the venue are documented. I'll let the committee draw their own conclusions about the intent." Outside counsel made a note. Linda looked at Ethan. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything to add?" He thought about what to say. He had prepared a version, careful, professional, calibrated. And then he thought about the resignation letter in the kitchen drawer and decided not to use it. "Everything Ms. Hamilton has said is accurate," he said. "And I want to add one thing. Every piece of work I've produced at Meridian for 4 years has been done to standard. Every evaluation I've received has been documented and corroborated by sources outside Ms. Hamilton's direct authority. My work doesn't require a relationship to justify it." He met Linda's eyes. "And the relationship, whatever its professional implications, does not reduce the work." The room held that for a moment. Linda closed her folder. "We'll complete the review by end of week. Both parties will receive formal notification. In the interim, Mr. Carter, your line management will temporarily transfer to VP level as a standard procedural step. This is not a punitive action." "Understood," Ethan said. "Ms. Hamilton, you'll continue in your current role, pending review completion." "Of course," Claire said. Marsh looked at neither of them as the room began to clear. Ethan noticed that outside counsel spoke quietly to Linda on the way out, and that Linda's expression as she listened was not the expression of someone who thought the filer of a disclosure had done something beyond reproach. He and Claire walked out together into the hallway, away from the room, and they kept walking until they reached the stairwell door, which she pushed open, and they were in the concrete quiet of the stairwell, and the door closed behind them. She leaned against the wall, exhaled. "You didn't use the prepared version," she said. "Neither did you," he said. She looked at him. "Mine was prepared. Your words were. The way you said them wasn't." He leaned against the opposite wall, facing her, 4 feet between them. "That last part, the competitive instrument, that wasn't in the folder." She was quiet for a moment. "No, it wasn't." "Good," he said. It was the best thing said in the room. Something crossed her face, tired and real, and almost amused. "He's not going to let this go easily." "I know." "The review could go a month." "I know. It's going to require us to be very careful. At the office. The way we..." "Claire." He looked at her steadily. "I know what it requires. I've been careful about things for a long time. I'm good at it." A pause. "But I'm not going back to pretending there's nothing here. That's the only thing off the table." She held his eyes. Then she nodded once and said, "Okay." They went back to the floor, and they worked the rest of the day like professionals, which they were, and the floor watched them, with the careful non-watching of people who had been present for the morning, and drawn their own conclusions, and the afternoon was full of emails, and the Harmon account, and a 2 o'clock call with the Cincinnati regional team that ran 40 minutes long, and it was in every observable sense a normal Monday. Except that at 3:40, Claire's assistant put a coffee on Ethan's desk, not from the lobby cart, from the break room, which was worse coffee, and which meant she'd made it herself, and the card said simply, "Harmon numbers look good. See." And that was it. He drank it. Every drop. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. The HR review concluded on a Thursday 26 days after it had begun, which was 2 days ahead of the stated timeline, which Ethan took as a signal before he'd read a word of the outcome. The finding was submitted to both parties simultaneously. He read his copy at his desk. Claire read hers in her office. He could see her through the glass, standing at her window with the document, and he watched her read and watched her face, and saw the moment she got to the finding, because her shoulders dropped half an inch, and she closed her eyes briefly and opened them again. He read the same thing 4 seconds later. No violation found. Disclosures processed and filed. Line management adjustment to remain in place as standard protocol for relationships between employees of different levels. The existing performance record of both parties considered in full. The disclosure filing by David Marsh noted as premature and procedurally irregular, that last phrase. He read it twice. He looked up. Claire was looking at him through the glass. He held up the document slightly. She nodded. That was all. That was enough. What happened to Marsh was not made public in the way that these things rarely are in corporate environments, announced quietly, absorbed by the institution, redistributed without press. He was reassigned to the Atlanta regional office in December, framed as a lateral strategic placement, which everyone who knew anything understood was not a promotion. He did not contest it. The weeks between the review and December had their own texture, careful at the office, as promised, professional in every observable way. But there was the Saturday hot chocolate. There was the Tuesday when Claire showed up at aftercare pickup because she'd been in a meeting 2 blocks away and had texted Ethan on the way out, and Lily had seen her first and run at her with the total commitment of a small person with no reservations. And Claire had caught her, and the other parents had watched the 3 of them walk away, and not one of them, Ethan thought, would have guessed that 6 weeks ago this had been a list in a notebook. There was the Sunday. Rosa finally met Claire. He'd told his aunt a week in advance, which was enough time for Rosa to clean the apartment 3 times and prepare food for 16 people for a dinner of 4. Claire had arrived on time, which Rosa had noted with audible approval. She had eaten everything on her plate, which Rosa had noted with even more approval, And then Lily had told the story of Mr. Biscuit's washing machine incident, and Rosa had laughed until she had to wipe her eyes, and Claire had laughed too. The real version, the one she couldn't catch, and Rosa had looked at Ethan across the table with an expression that said, "I called it in September and you owe me $20. Without using any words at all. He paid her the $20 before Claire arrived, actually. He'd known. The hard thing happened in November's last week. He got the call on a Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon from a number in Indiana he didn't recognize, and then a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years. His Uncle Dale, his father figure since he was 17, the man who had driven 6 hours to Chicago when Jessica left, who had sat at that same kitchen table and said nothing for an hour, and then said, "You're going to be fine," and been right. Dale had a stroke on Tuesday night. He was gone by Wednesday morning. Ethan hung up the phone and sat at his desk and looked at his computer screen and felt the specific quality of grief that isn't dramatic, not the kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind, the kind that empties a room inside you that you didn't know you were still keeping furnished for someone. He didn't move for 4 minutes. He knew it was 4 minutes, because the clock on his computer didn't lie. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder, one hand firm, and there. He didn't have to look. He knew the weight of it. "Come on," Claire said quietly. She walked him to the small conference room, the one with frosted glass, the one people used for calls they didn't want observed. She closed the door. And she didn't say anything about the office, or the floor, or the review, or any of the professional architecture around them. She just stood there with him in the small room and let him be in it. After a moment he said, "Dale was the one who taught me to drive. Had to teach me twice because I failed the test the first time and didn't tell anyone for a month." He stopped. He thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Claire said nothing. Just stayed. "He used to call Lily his honorary granddaughter," Ethan said. "He'd never met her. He called her that every time we talked. Asked about her school, her rabbit, what her favorite color was." He exhaled. He would have loved the Benson story. Claire sat down across from him. Not beside him, across from him, where he could see her face, where she wasn't just a presence, but a person. Present. Fully there. "He sounds like someone who knew how to love people without making them feel like a project," she said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's exactly what he was." She held his eyes. "Tell me more about him." So he did. For 20 minutes, in a small frosted glass conference room in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, Ethan Carter told Claire Hamilton about Dale Putnam, the drive back from Indiana, the kitchen table, the 6-hour round trip, the phone calls, the honorary granddaughter. And she listened, the way she'd listened to Lily's Mr. Biscuit biography, which was to say, completely without waiting for her turn, without managing the conversation toward an outcome. When he finished, she said, "He raised you right." "He finished the job," Ethan said. "My mom started it. He finished it." She nodded. Then it was well finished. He looked at her across the table and thought about the meeting in September, the notebook, the list, the words professional and temporary, and thought about how strange and specific and entirely non-linear life was that the arrangement had landed here in a small conference room on a Wednesday, with grief and a cup of cold coffee between them and this woman who had started as the most exhausting person he'd ever worked for and become the clearest thing in his life. He went to Indiana on Friday. Claire drove him to the station Thursday night. Lily had been at Rosa's, and after Ethan came back downstairs with his bag, Claire was standing by the car and she said, "I'll get Lily from Rosa's on Friday. I'll take her for hot chocolate and we'll meet you at home when you get back Sunday." He looked at her. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said. And the way she said it, simple, direct, no performance, no agenda, was the way she said things when she meant them all the way down. "Okay," he said. She hugged him before he got in the cab. Not a long hug. She wasn't built for long displays. Not yet, maybe not ever, and he didn't need her to be. Just her arms around him for a moment, her face against his neck, her hands flat against his back. He held on. Then he let go and got in the cab and didn't look back, because he knew if he looked back, he would not be able to do what the weekend required, which was to stand at the graveside of a man who had taught him what it meant to show up for the people you loved and receive that lesson one final time. He came back Sunday evening to his apartment, where Lily was asleep in her bed with Mr. Biscuit and a drawing she'd made at Claire's kitchen table, a house with 4 stick figures, 1 tall woman, 1 tall man, 1 small girl, and a large yellow dog taped to the wall above the pillow. Claire was in the kitchen. She'd made dinner. Nothing elaborate pasta garlic bread, something simple and warm that filled the apartment with the specific kind of comfort that can't be ordered or arranged, only produced by someone who knows what a person needs when they're tired down to the bone. She looked up when he came in, read his face the way she'd learned to the whole register of it past the controlled surface. "Sit down," she said. "It's almost ready." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where the resignation letter had lived in a drawer for 3 weeks. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled it out, the letter still folded along the same creases, soft now from being handled, and put it on the table. Claire looked at it, looked at him. "I've been carrying that for almost a year," he said. She didn't say anything. "I'm not going to send it," he said. "I just wanted to put it down somewhere real." He smoothed it flat on the table. "Dale used to say that the things we carry that we don't put down are the things that cost us the most, even when we're holding them for good reasons." She came around the counter, sat across from him at the table, the same position from the conference room, from the coffee shop, every conversation where the truth got told. She looked at the letter, then at him. "What would you have written instead?" she said, "if you weren't resigning?" He thought about it. "Nothing," he said. "I would have written nothing. I would have just stayed." She nodded, reached across the table, put her hand over the letter, over his hand beneath it. "Stay," she said. He looked at her. She held his eyes, and didn't look away, and didn't manage what was on her face, and said it again quietly, with the full weight of what it meant coming from a woman who had spent 6 years making sure she never needed anything from anyone badly enough to ask for it. "Stay," she said, "not at Meridian. Here, in this." Her fingers pressed against his. "With me." He turned his hand over under hers, held it. "Yeah," he said. She exhaled slow, total, the kind of exhale that carries months in it. "Okay," she said, and smiled. The real one. The version he'd been collecting since September. Unguarded, unmanaged, entirely hers. The pasta was slightly overcooked because they forgot to check it for about 10 minutes. Neither of them mentioned it. They ate at the kitchen table and talked about Dale and about Lily's drawing and about Benson, who Dana had sent a photo of that afternoon, standing in the garden looking confused and noble, and about nothing specific and everything at once, the way people talk when they've stopped rationing themselves. Later, much later, after the dinner and the dishes, and Lily checked and settled after the apartment had gone quiet, they sat on the couch with the television on low and not watching it, and Claire said out of nothing, "I called Dana today." "Yeah. She asked about you." A pause. She said Margaret told her that you were the first person she'd seen make me look like myself in years." And Dana said, "Yes, I know. I said so in my toast." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't realize she knew she was talking about something real when she said it. I thought she was just being kind." "She was being both," he said. Claire leaned into his shoulder. The same motion as the conference room, the same weight, familiar now, specific to her, specific to them. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay. When I proposed the arrangement," she stopped. "When I came to your desk with the coffee, I told myself it was strategic, that I'd assessed the situation and identified the optimal solution." A pause, smaller. "But I'd been watching you for 8 months. I knew your schedule before you sat down. I knew how you took your coffee. I knew the specific way you went quiet when something in a meeting went wrong, and you were deciding whether to say something." She didn't look at him. "I called it a strategy because that was the only language I had for wanting something I didn't know how to want directly." He thought about his own 8 months. The 37 emails, the meetings, the break room on a Friday morning, the paper crown in the pickup line. "I called it manageable," he said. Every time it got real, I called it manageable. She made a sound, almost a laugh. We were both terrible at pretending. Worst fake relationship I've ever been in, he said. It's the only one I've been in. Mine too, he said. She laughed. The real version. Full, real, unguarded, the one he would never get tired of being the reason for. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in February, Ethan Carter took Claire Hamilton back to the cafe in Lincoln Park. Their cafe now, which was a thing that had happened gradually, and without a ceremony, the way the best things do. He got there first, sat at the corner table, ordered 2 coffees and waited. And when the door opened and she came in with the February cold behind her and her hair down and her coat dark, and she looked like the woman from every version of the last 5 months. The director, the person, the one who had crouched down to Lily's level in the school pickup line and taken her hand like it was the most natural thing. He felt the full weight of it, of all of it, land somewhere specific and solid inside him. She sat down, looked at him. You look like you're going to say something. I am, he said. Okay. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. Say it. He looked at her directly. No professional distance, no careful management, just him and her, and the corner table, and the coffee, and everything they'd built out of a list in a notebook and a booking error and a dark room where someone had needed to reach for something solid. We started as a lie, he said. We started as an arrangement that had a list and an exit strategy, and the words professional and temporary attached to it. He held her eyes. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the coffee on my desk, and the walk to school, and the hot chocolate, and Lily taking your hand, and the dark, and the room, and the conference room on a Wednesday, and the dinner you made Sunday, you became the only real thing in my life. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She wasn't managing it. I don't have a speech, he said. I don't have a dramatic line. I want you to know that it's real. That it was real before either of us had language for it. He paused. And that I'm done being careful about it. She set down the coffee cup, reached across the corner table, put her hand against the side of his face, the same gesture, the same hand, the one from the dark of the room in Galena, except that this time there was full daylight and a cafe full of people and no arrangement to hide inside of. You know, she said, for someone who was never going to send that letter, you're pretty good at saying the thing. I had a good teacher, he said. She's very direct. She smiled. The real one. All the way. Ethan. Yeah. I love you, she said. Not performed. Not managed. Not strategic. Just true the way things are true when they've been building for a long time and finally find the right room to live in. I don't know exactly when it started. I know it was before I had a name for it. I know it cost me more to admit than almost anything I've done in a boardroom. She looked at him. And I know that right now, sitting here, I am not afraid of it. He took her hand from his face, held it. That's all I ever wanted to hear, he said. Outside Chicago moved through its February with the complete indifference of a city that has seen everything. Inside the corner cafe at a corner table where a fake relationship had been planned in a leather notebook with a list that included exit strategy. A real one confirmed itself with 2 cups of coffee and no audience and no performance and no distance left between them. Lily. When they told her that evening, listen to the whole explanation with the serious attention she gave important things. Then she said, "Does this mean Claire can come to my school play?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Can Benson come?" "Probably not to the school play," Claire said. "But we can visit him." Lily considered the terms, nodded. "Okay," she said. "Deal." And went back to coloring. That was it. That was the whole negotiation. 6 years old, and she had known from the moment she'd taken Claire's hand in the school pickup line that the arrangement was already over and the real thing had already started. She'd just been waiting for the adults to catch up. And they had, finally, all the way. No more lists, no more notebooks, no more exit strategies, no more folding themselves up and calling it professional, no more 30-second mornings that belonged to no one. They had gotten there the only way people actually get anywhere real, not through planning, not through strategy, not through anything that could have been written in advance, but through showing up and staying and choosing each other again every day in the small, specific ways that don't look like much from the outside and mean everything from the inside. That was the truth of it. That was all of it. And it was enough. It was in fact exactly enough.